Mediterranean dough. Now this dough is going to be used for lots of ancient style or older style or traditional pizzas that you would traditionally find around the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean style dough incorporates a lot of fat into the dough. So back in old times, because a lot of the places around the Mediterranean were extremely dry, or this style of pizza or pie was traditionally made by peasants or people who didn't have a lot of money. So we incorporate a lot of fat, mostly olive oil, to add additional calories, flavor, and allow this type of pizza to last several days. The Mediterranean style dough creates a very unique texture because of the inclusion of so much oil or fat into the dough. Think of a short crust pastry but leavened with yeast. It's almost closer to a pastry and a bread sort of mixed together, so it does create a very unique texture and a delicious pizza. So let's get into making this Mediterranean pizza dough crust. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is watch the video on how to make a fermented dough or how to make your very own sourdough stiff starter. Now I've already created some fermented dough a few days ago, so it's going to add lots and lots of flavor to this dough and also extend the life of the product. Oh, I can already smell all of that flavor. So I'm actually going to be doing 2 doughs today. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is in your bowls, we're going to add our measurement of water. And just ensure whenever you are making yeasted breads that you use a filtered water. You don't want to use water from the tap, just in case there's any additives in that water that will prevent the yeast from doing its thing and fermenting your dough. Next, we're going to add our yeast. Now you can use dry yeast or fresh yeast. I'm using fresh yeast today. And depending on whether you're using a fermented dough or a sourdough stiff starter will depend on how much yeast you'll be using, and you can just check your recipe on that. So now we're going to be adding our flour. So because this is a more ancient style dough, we may not have had access to stronger flours, so I am using an all-purpose flour today. And an all-purpose flour will generally contain about 10% protein. So on the back of your pack where you see 100 gram serving size, you want to look for the 10 grams of protein, and that's your all-purpose, also known as plain flour. So I'm going to get these onto our mixer now using our hook attachment and just start to get everything combined together on a low speed. Now that our flour, yeast and water have just started coming together, it might look a little bit like a dry dough, but don't worry about that. Back on the mixer, and now we're going to add our fermented dough or your sourdough starter. So this one, as I mentioned, I prepared a few days ahead of time just to develop a lot of flavor, and it's been in my refrigerator. And you can see there's been a lot of activity with the yeast in there. So I'm going to put half. So I've made a double recipe today, so I'm just putting the portion needed in each of my bowls. And I'm going to get this going again just on a low speed until everything comes together. Now that our first few ingredients have been mixed, we're going to take these off our mixer. And now if you're at home and you don't have a stand mixer, you can do all of these steps by hand as well. So you want to cover these now. I'm just using some covers that go on these bowls, but even just a tea towel. And we're going to set these aside for 15 minutes, just for some of that flour to start hydrating all of that moisture. I'm going to start developing our gluten as well. So just set those aside for 15 minutes on your bench, and then we're going to come back to those shortly. So it's been 15 minutes and our doughs have been hydrating. So now we're going to get them back onto our mixers, and we're going to knead this until we can start to get some gluten development and perform a window test. So you want to put it on speed 2 for about 4 to 8 minutes. So our doughs have been mixing for quite a while. We're developing some gluten structure. Now we're going to add our salt and give that a bit of a mix. Now once our salt is mixed through, we're going to slowly start adding our fat. So in my first mixer, I'm going to be slowly adding some olive oil, and in my second mixer, I'm going to be slowly adding some vegan butter. So you can choose which fat you want to add to your dough. And you want to do this a little bit at a time so that the fat will be emulsified into the dough. Just mix on a low speed. If you're finding that your dough is taking a little bit longer that you would like to incorporate the fat, you can switch over to your paddle attachment, which is this one here, and continue adding your fat. So all of our fat has been added to our Mediterranean dough, and you'll know that it's ready when that dough starts retracting from the sides of the bowl. And that's when you know that the gluten has developed and everything has been emulsified into the dough. So each dough is going to look a little bit different. So the olive oil one is going to look a little bit smoother, and the one with the vegan butter is going to look a little bit more stringy, very similar to what we know as like a brioche dough. So I've got some containers here, and I've just put a tiny bit of oil in there, and we're just going to lightly grease these. And we're going to take our dough out, and just using our dough scraper, pop that into our containers. So now we're going to do some stretch and fold. So what you want to do is take your dough, start at one corner, and we're going to stretch it up and fold it over itself. And doing this is going to create additional gluten development and get some even air bubbles within our dough. So just continue to do that all the way around. And you'll notice the feel of this dough is really soft and silky. So we're just doing it on each corner. Pop the lid on. And the same with our olive oil version. And then we're going to set these aside to proof on the bench. So just pop the lids on. You don't want to put it in an area which is exceeding around 26, 27 degrees Celsius. So just somewhere fairly warm, but just not too hot. And we're going to wait until these quadruple in size, and that's going to take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, just depending on the temperature of your room. So every about 45 minutes or hour, we're going to continue doing our stretch and fold.